Most people think the path to mental strength is paved with thoughts, affirmations, mindset, motivation. But there's a deeper truth buried in your biology. The real key is breath. Not just any breath, but deliberate, intentional, trained breathing that signals your nervous system to either rise to the challenge or return to calm. The way you breathe directly controls your brain's stress and focus circuits. This is not philosophy. This is physiology. Your breath is not just air moving in and out of your lungs. It is electrical instruction, chemical influence, and neural command. Every single inhale and exhale sends data to the brain, shaping how it perceives threat, how it processes attention, and how it decides to either react or remain composed. Your breath is the language your body uses to speak to your brain, and most people have never learned how to speak that language with purpose. When breath is erratic, shallow, high in the chest, the body prepares for war even if there's no enemy. The heart rate increases, cortisol rises, and the brain's prefrontal cortex, the command center for rational thought, begins to shut down. You lose clarity, you lose perspective, you become reactive, but when breath is deep, slow, and deliberate, especially through the nose, it signals safety. It signals stability. It tells the brain you are in control, and the brain responds with presence, focus, and power. This relationship between breath and brain is not symbolic. It is structural. There are direct pathways from the diaphragm and lungs to the brainstem, to the insular cortex, and to the amygdala. The mechanical act of breathing is intertwined with the electrical rhythms of the mind. You can meditate for hours, read every book on self-mastery, but if your breath is chaotic, your brain will be too. You will be at the mercy of your biology, but when you harness breath, when you learn to control it under stress, you gain access to the deepest levels of command available to a human being. Breath is the first thing you did when you entered this world. It will be the last thing you do when you leave it. It is sacred, given, ordained. It is the most constant act of your existence, and yet we treat it like background noise. But those who understand, those who seek not just knowledge but transformation, know that the breath is the gate. It is the first tool of warriors, saints, healers, and leaders. It is the invisible sword that cuts through fear, distraction, and weakness. When the world goes dark, when chaos rises, when your thoughts begin to betray you, the breath remains. It is always with you, waiting to be reclaimed, waiting to be used as it was designed to stabilize the mind, to command the body, to anchor the soul. You do not need technology to change your state. You do not need permission. You need discipline. You need awareness. You need to train the breath as a weapon forged by design, sharpened by repetition, and wielded in silence. Because when you learn to control your breath, you are no longer a passenger of your biology. You are its master. You become what you were made to be, an agent of calm in storms, a presence that cannot be moved, a mind that does not break under pressure. Shallow, rapid breathing triggers panic. Deep, slow nasal breathing builds control. This truth lives in the architecture of your nervous system. It's not a mental trick or a motivational slogan. It's embedded in the circuitry that governs how you react to the world. The pace and depth of your breath are the code your body uses to decide whether to activate stress responses or downshift into clarity. And that code can be rewritten if you're willing to take control of it. Most people breathe high in their chest, short and fast, without realizing what it's doing to their mind. This kind of breathing is interpreted by the brain as a signal of threat. It says something's wrong. And even if your environment is safe, your internal state begins to match that panic. Anxiety rises, the heart speeds up, blood flow moves away from the brain and into the limbs. You become primed for fight or flight, even when no fight exists. But the opposite is just as true. When you breathe slowly, deeply, through your nose, not your mouth, you activate a completely different system. The parasympathetic nervous system, the system of calm, restoration, and clarity. Nasal breathing isn't just more efficient, It recruits nerve pathways and reflexes that engage the brain's brakes. The vagus nerve, a highway from your lungs to your brain, detects this slow, deep breathing and sends a message upward, "We're safe." The brain then opens up cognitive resources that were shut down under stress. You begin to think clearly. You begin to respond, not react. You regain access to parts of yourself that panic hides. The shift isn't slow. It happens in seconds. The nervous system doesn't need hours to decide how to feel. It takes its cue from how you breathe. And when you train yourself to default to slow, controlled nasal breathing, especially under pressure, you begin to reverse years of unconscious programming. You teach your brain that discomfort doesn't mean danger. You build tolerance, you build presence, you build the kind of strength that can't be faked and won't be shaken. This is not about breathing to feel better. It's about breathing to become better, to create a nervous system that doesn't crumble under challenge, a mind that stays still while the world moves, a soul that doesn't retreat just because the body feels pressure. Control starts in the lungs. It spreads through the bloodstream. It locks into the brain like armor. This is how warriors are built, not in noise, but in breath, not by overpowering the moment, but by mastering the rhythm within it. Breath is the beginning of every decision, every thought, every emotional outcome. And when you take control of it, you stop living as a prisoner of reaction and start rising as a person of power. Your breath is the fastest way to shift your nervous system state, faster than thoughts. Thought requires language, reasoning, and time. But breath is immediate. It doesn't ask permission from the mind, it commands the body directly. When your heart is racing, when panic grabs your chest, when your world starts to spiral, trying to think your way into calm is like trying to hold back a flood with your hands. But breath, deep, deliberate breath, can drop the floodgates instantly. It signals the deepest structures of your biology that you are not at war. It flips a switch that thoughts cannot reach. This is not about theory. It is electrical, chemical, primal. When you inhale slowly, the diaphragm sends signals through the vagus nerve straight to the brainstem. The amygdala, the fear center, listens. The hypothalamus recalibrates. Hormones shift. Cortisol begins to fall. Heart rate slows. The entire system listens to the breath like a command. That command bypasses logic, bypasses story, bypasses trauma. It doesn't need your beliefs to work. It just works. We live in a world that teaches people to talk themselves out of stress, to rationalize, to affirm, but those tools, while valuable, sit upstream from the problem. They're trying to manage emotion through intellect. That's like trying to steer a ship by adjusting the sails while the hull is breaking apart. Breath, on the other hand, gets to the root. It is the rudder. It controls the engine. It anchors the vessel in storms that words cannot tame. Even the most disciplined minds fall apart under pressure if they can't regulate their state. And the most resilient souls rise not because of what they think, but because of what they practice in the silence of their own body. Breath is that practice. It is the steering wheel that turns chaos into clarity. It's the only tool you always have in every moment, in every room, in every challenge. It doesn't matter if you're alone in the dark or standing on a stage. Your breath is always there, waiting, listening, willing to be your weapon. This is what separates the distracted from the deliberate, the reactive from the resilient. It's not more knowledge. It's not stronger emotion. It's control of breath, mastery of the one function that bridges the conscious and unconscious mind. And those who learn to use it become unshakable. They don't fear stress, they train with it. They don't wait for peace, they generate it. They understand that while thoughts are powerful, breath is primary, breath is foundational. And when harnessed, it can shift the entire landscape of your inner world before a single word is ever spoken. Breathwork trains the brain to remain calm under chaos and focused under pressure. In the laboratory of life, stress is not the enemy, it is the forge. And what determines whether you're refined or destroyed by that forge is not how much you can think, but how well you can breathe. When you deliberately guide your breath under stress, you're not just calming your body, you are teaching your brain what to do the next time adversity hits. You are conditioning your nervous system to associate challenge with composure instead of collapse. Every time you meet pressure with breath instead of panic, you're laying down new neural circuitry. You're rewiring the amygdala, the seat of fear. You're teaching the prefrontal cortex, your command center, to stay online when others shut down. Breathwork isn't just a method, it's a rehearsal, a form of preparation that makes you stronger before the test even arrives. Because when the real storm comes, the body doesn't rise to the level of motivation, it falls to the level of training. Breath is the only internal lever you can pull while the storm is still raging. You can't change the world around you, but you can change the world within you. And when you use breath as your training ground, you make that shift automatic. In the same way, a soldier drills until movement becomes instinct. Breath training wires calmness into the very reflexes of your nervous system. You become the kind of person who does not flinch in the face of heat, who does not collapse under the weight of intensity, who can hold their center while the ground shakes. This is not passive relaxation, this is deliberate adaptation. You are not using breath to escape reality, you are using it to transform your relationship with it, to build strength in the silence, to forge a response that doesn't depend on the comfort of your environment, but on the clarity of your nervous system. You train the brain to lock onto what matters, even when distractions scream. You condition the mind to stay open while the heart pounds. You prepare your soul to remain unmoved, not because the storm isn't real, but because your foundation is deeper than the wind. Breathwork is not about comfort, it is about capacity, and the more capacity you build through training your breath, the more you become the kind of person who can carry weight without shaking, who can feel fear without bowing to it, who can walk through fire with a mind that is sharp, a spirit that is still, and a breath that holds the entire system in command. Breathing is the only system in the human body that is both automatic and under your conscious control, and that is no accident. That design is divine. It is the Creator's signature on your biology. You don't choose to breathe, yet you can choose how to breathe. And in that choice lies power. In that moment of conscious control over an unconscious act, you find the gateway between the body and the mind, the bridge between the external world and your internal experience. The ancient sages called it spirit. The warriors called it focus. Neuroscience calls it regulation. But whatever name you use, the truth is the same. Breath is the one tool that connects thought and physiology. It is the lever you were given to shift your state without changing your circumstances. When life feels out of control, when fear tries to rise, when anger starts to lead, your breath remains under your command. That breath is not passive, it's not weak, it is the beginning of discipline. Every deep inhale and controlled exhale is a signal. I choose response over reaction. I choose order over chaos. I choose to engage my biology instead of be ruled by it. Most people never tap into this. They ride the rhythms of stress like a broken boat on open water. But the disciplined few learn to grip the wheel, to regulate their breath even when the world screams for them to lose control. That's not because they're special. It's because they trained, they practiced under calm so they could perform under stress. They learned that if you can master your breath, you can master your state. And if you can master your state, you can master your behavior. And behavior, repeated, becomes identity. This is how transformation begins, not with big external change, but with small internal commands. Commands repeated daily, commands whispered in silence, commands delivered through breath. This is the root of all self-control. It's not just about grit. It's not just about mindset. It's about engaging the nervous system directly, bending it toward stillness, toward clarity, toward strength. And the breath is the access point. It is always with you. You don't need to buy it. You don't need to earn it. You don't need to ask for it. But you do need to learn to use it, because once you do, everything changes. You stop being a reactor and start being a creator. You stop being pulled and start anchoring. You stop being ruled by stress and start ruling over it. That is why the breath matters. That is why this practice is sacred. Because through it, the body aligns, the mind sharpens, and the soul remembers who it was built to be, not a slave to circumstance, but a sovereign force rooted in control, discipline, and power. Controlled breath transforms fear into fuel and chaos into clarity. It doesn't numb the experience of stress, it refines it. It takes the sharp edge of panic and shapes it into precision. It takes the noise of overwhelm and tunes it into focus. This isn't about escaping what you feel. It's about facing it with the kind of presence that only trained breathing can produce. Because breath is the boundary line between instinct and intention, and every time you cross that line with control, you become less reactive and more resilient. In moments of uncertainty, when the outcome is unclear and the stakes are high, people often let their physiology lead them into mental collapse. Their breath becomes shallow, erratic, loud, their vision narrows, their thinking scrambles. But those who have trained their breath, who have practiced under pressure, who have rehearsed in silence, breathe low, slow, and deep. They hold their rhythm when the world loses theirs, and because of that, they retain access to the higher faculties of their mind. Strategic thinking, emotional regulation, creative decision making, all of these are made possible not in the absence of pressure, but in the presence of controlled breath. What separates chaos from clarity isn't the situation, it's the state you're in when facing it. You could be in the same environment, under the same weight, but the way you breathe will determine whether you break or build. The one who gasps loses access to logic. The one who breathes with control regains command. Breath becomes the first step toward reclaiming your power. It becomes the moment you stop spiraling and start stabilizing. The body calms, the mind centers, and clarity, which seemed so far away, returns like a faithful servant to the throne of presence. The breath doesn't eliminate the storm, it builds the anchor, and an anchored person is not immune to stress. They are forged through it. They aren't without fear, they're unmoved by it. Controlled breathing is the daily discipline that prepares you to meet fearite. Why and say, "You don't own me." It prepares you to walk into chaos, not with arrogance, but with awareness. Because when the breath is steady, the ground beneath you feels unshakable, no matter how loud the world becomes. This is not theoretical, it's biological, it's spiritual, it's the convergence of breath and being, a sacred act that turns physiology into power. Because the body listens to the breath before it listens to the mind, and when the body hears calm, it begins to behave like it. When the breath signals strength, the brain begins to believe it. In that moment, fear becomes a teacher, chaos becomes a signal, and clarity becomes your new default. Not because the storm is over, but because your breath made you strong enough to walk through it.